What's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's another episode of Spectator Sports, and I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca. Before we get into the episode covering the NFL and the NBA, let's do some housekeeping. If you're new to the channel, like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you haven't done so already, take a look at our Instagram and TikTok pages, and you can get the audio from this podcast on Spotify. All links are in the description, and you can get clips from this podcast as well in our playlist. Thank you. Starting off, we have some unfortunate news to report from the Carolina Panthers is that they fired their head coach Frank Reich prior to the start of week 13. And this is a decision that we saw coming after their really rough start. They were one of the last winless teams in the NFL, and they remain to be the worst team across the entire league. And we can point the fingers between David Tepper, the owner who likes to mess around and put his fingerprints all over the franchise. We can talk about the selection with Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud, but the results matter, of course, in the NFL. And I think some of the biggest things that we need to break down is this disparity between Bryce Young and what he's looked and CJ Stroud. Now, two different players, two different situations. My thing is, what did owner David Tepper really expect? He had the first overall pick that he directed the trade up to. There was some conflict whether or not to trade up to 2 versus 1. You want to go up to 1 because you have the ability to pick whoever you want. You're not basing it off of somebody else's decision. And makes sense that they wanted to make this move, but it sacrifices your best offensive player and the pick in 2024. They took Bryce Young, the undersized player who we had concerns with, but he did win the Heisman, has some upside, absolutely. But in this situation, this offensive line has struggled to create lanes for Christian McCaffrey when he was here. And then, not a lot of talent. They tried to address the offensive line in 2022. Not really best results right there. They signed Adam Thielen, who I think has been probably the best player in this team just because he's been able to be consistent despite the age. I think offensively he's been their best offensive player this year. A lot of holes on this team, and now you've given up assets and very minimal results for that. And Frank Reich, unfortunately, is the guy to suffer the consequences of that. He is known to be a guy that can help cultivate quarterbacks. He got really started when he was in Philadelphia with their Super Bowl run in 2017. He helped take Carson Wentz from a rookie quarterback who had holes in his game to being a near MVP candidate. And then immediately after they win the Super Bowl, he is given the head coaching gig to the Indianapolis Colts. He had Andrew Luck, and then things kind of fell off the wagon there after a revolving door of quarterbacks after Andrew Luck's retirement. And since taking over ownership of the Carolina Panthers, he started off with Ron Rivera as the head coach, and he was fired in the 2019 season. They brought on Matt Rule, and he lasted, 3-ish seasons, didn't pan out at all. And then you bring in Frank Reich and fire him midway through the 2023 year in his first year. And there's not a lot of patience here. You need to let things cultivate, grow. I think the issue was Frank Reich again suffered the consequences due to poor ownership, meddling owners, trying to do too much, because when they were looking into who would be their top overall pick, they were split, right? CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. In a pro day at Ohio State, Frank Reich was there, and he was very impressed with CJ Stroud, and he even made the promise that we'll see you in a few weeks to draft you. That obviously didn't pan out, and we've seen the two quarterbacks go basically in opposite directions, and CJ Stroud has become the overwhelming Rookie of the Year candidate, even taking the Houston Texans to the edges of the playoff race. Setting rookie records, while Bryce Young has completely struggled. 187 yards a game, just 9 touchdown passes to 9 interceptions, suffered an injury already, and that already boosts the injury concerns due to his lack of size. We're not sure what we have in Bryce Young in Carolina, but I do think it's an organizational issue. This is a case where there's a lot of holes and they don't have a lot of assets. Whoever is going to take on this head coaching gig doesn't have their first round pick. Going to gonna have probably a short leash yet again. They're gonna need a 2-year turnaround to look somewhat competitive, because the way it looks, you don't have a lot of assets because you sacrifice those to get Bryce Young. And now you got to figure out who it is, who your pieces are moving forward, and then there might be even fire sales to make up and get assets back, because they need younger players. They need to retool the entire roster. It's truly a mess in Carolina. To start this year, Tyreek Hill came up with the lofty goal of becoming the first ever player to eclipse the 2,000-yard mark. And people laughed. People maybe labeled him as being selfish, but he has backed it up. I mean, so far this year, he is on pace to break it and be the first ever player to do so. Now, he does have the luxury of that extra game compared to what Calvin Johnson had, because he has the current record. But let's give credit where credit is due. I mean, Tyreek Hill has been consistently the best deep threat since entering the league, and every defense is just terrified to either press him or give him a soft cushion, because either way, it is a pick your poison type of tactic, where if you give him space, he can juke and can outrun anybody to the pylon, or if you give him press coverage, he can try to get out of it most likely, and if you press him, that's only allowed for the first 5 yards, and after that you need to try to bracket him, otherwise he's going to run right by your cornerback. And it seemed that Washington didn't get the memo yet again, fresh off of firing Jack Del Rio off of that Thanksgiving debacle against the Dallas Cowboys. Right off the bat, deep ball to Tyreek Hill, and he's gone yet again. And we've seen this time in and time out. I do think he'll be the offensive player of the year. He'll break the record at 2,000 yards receiving. It's now a question of, now we've seen this with the Miami Dolphins. They've had these explosive performances, but can they do this in the playoffs? Because as of right now, they are the number 1 seed, but I need to see them if they can travel, because there's still a chance that they would have to play one of these teams in the Northeast or in a colder set of conditions. They struggled against Buffalo, their division rival, in cold, wintry conditions. Baltimore is still up for grabs for the number 1 seed, even the Kansas City Chiefs. So if they don't get home field advantage, I still would like to see them try and see if they can travel just as well. But so far, I mean, against Washington, it was December, cold, wet conditions, and he's still able to get by defenses there. So that was a positive sign for Miami. I'm really excited to see what they can do moving forward in this stretch run. Indianapolis snags a divisional win over the Tennessee Titans, and they have quietly ascended to a team that was left for dead after Anthony Richardson was done for the year with that shoulder injury, and Gardner Minshew has picked up for him and propelled them to a 7-5 record. It's not all on Gardner Minshew. I think the defense is playing lights out. They're getting key stops when they can. The running game has been solid despite the absence of Jonathan Taylor for a couple stints of this season. And I mean, Michael Pittman has been the go-to receiver in this offense. I think Shane Steichen has really unleashed what his capabilities are. And I think Gardner Minshew is somewhat flourishing in the Shane Steichen offense. They were very good when they were in Philadelphia in certain pieces. And now to translate that over to Indianapolis has been nothing but success over there. They're in the playoff hunt. And I still definitely think that Houston and Cleveland would have something to say about that. But right now, I do think that they have a really good shot to make the playoffs. And what a story it could be. Backup quarterback coming in, and Shane Steichen has to get some Coach of the Year consideration, and I think he has a tough ask though with D'Amico Ryans there, but certainly deserving of Coach of the Year consideration. The Houston Texans finally snapped Denver's 5-game winning streak, and they did so again through this tough, gritty performance late. They've been in a couple ball games where it's been coming down to the wire. They did lose a previous matchup with the Jacksonville Jaguars and a matchup with the Atlanta Falcons this year. But other cases, CJ Stroud, if he's given the ball late, he will execute. It's just a matter of not whether the defense can get a stop. And this time they did. They had a chance to stop Russell Wilson, and he threw his 3rd interception trying to set up a game-winning touchdown, but it wasn't meant to be. D'Amico Ryans, like I said, has to be the front runner for Coach of the Year. He has some competition in his own division with Shane Steichen. But I think considering the circumstances, Houston has been at the bottom of the NFL for the past few seasons. And I'm really hoping that we get to see more out of CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans. They could be a nice Cinderella story. They are still trying to get into the playoff mix, but at 7-5, you get a crucial tiebreaker over the Denver Broncos, who were hot, to say the least. And I think with them getting this win, it's going to pay big dividends because this AFC wildcard race is very stacked. You have the Pittsburgh Steelers at 7-5, the Cleveland Browns, Indianapolis Colts, Houston Texans, all in that 7-5 range. And don't get me started with the 6-6 teams. It is very jumbled right now, but getting conference wins, tiebreakers head-to-head are very crucial for this stretch run. And right now, this is already exceeding expectations of what we thought Houston has done this year. The Lions laid a dud on Thanksgiving. They had all the national media on them and simply were just too sloppy against the Green Bay Packers. They had home field advantage, and this was a great chance for them to showcase what they have done. But issues have been turnovers this year, and if they turn over the ball, they, like any team, get shellacked. And they were down for much of that game against Green Bay, but this time they were very much ahead of the New Orleans Saints for much of this game. We got to see that creativity come out yet again. We got some motion, we got reverses. Jameson Williams, anytime he touches the ball, whether it's deep balls or him getting the ball and having the ability to make moves in open fields, have proven to be big results for the Detroit Lions. And Sam Laporta, I mean, we haven't talked about him recently, but he's consistently been one of the best tight ends in the NFL this year. Then I think if CJ Stroud wasn't having such a dominant year offensively, Sam Laporta should be getting some Rookie of the Year consideration. I mean, he's just been consistently the go-to option for Jared Goff. We know that he likes tight ends. When his days in LA, he went to Tyler Higbee on a routine basis. And when Amon-Ra St. Brown is covered, there's always a security blanket out there in Sam Laporta, and this was probably his best game of his young career. Definitely let New Orleans get back into the game with Jameis Winston taking over for the injured Derek Carr, but I think that this was a good rebound win. It wasn't a coast to an easy victory like we expected them to be, but the fact that they were to hold on, now they're 9-3, this is their best mark in over 60 years. I think that Detroit is just eyeing that NFC North title. It's only a matter of time before they clinch that division, and now it's a matter, can they go to the 2 seed or even steal the 1 seed based on their schedule, because they're very capable of doing so. It's just keeping the turnovers down, and they're a very tough team to beat. The biggest game of Week 13 was the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Philadelphia Eagles, rematch of the 2022 NFC Championship game. San Francisco has been feeling slighted. They have talked a lot of trash throughout the year. They have been upset, butthurt, whatever you want to call it. They were very moved by the fact that they were just steamrolling through opponent, even in the playoffs. And you get to the last hurdle before the Super Bowl, and you think you have an even matchup, but unfortunately with Kyle Shanahan going to elect to use a backup tight end to guard or try to block Hassan Reddick, simply blows up the play, and Brock Purdy's elbow is done. He can't throw. Backup quarterback Josh Johnson is knocked out due to a concussion, and then it's slim pickings from there because you have no quarterback that can throw, and the Eagles ran away with that NFC title and on to the Super Bowl. The 49ers stewed over it throughout the entire offseason. They felt slighted, they felt cheated, they felt robbed of an opportunity of a fair matchup. And I personally thought that it was a little excessive. Unfortunately, things happened, and they did necessarily ask for it. I thought, Kyle Shanahan is this offensive guru. He's very consistent and very creative with blocking schemes. You see Trent Williams in motion, and, Kyle Juszczyk using the run game as well. Didn't even think to chip Hassan Reddick in that exchange, but that led to all this motivation to this heavyweight fight, and simply they unleashed and steamrolled the Philadelphia Eagles. They embarrassed them on their home field, gave them their first home loss of the year. And with the Philadelphia Eagles and how they've looked the last month they've been shaky, but they've been winning. And it goes with some of the issues of winning disguises losses or weaknesses, and I think a lot of those weaknesses were exposed. The back end, the defense has been, let's face it, pretty suspect to start this year. Darius Slay has looked a step slower. Bradbury hasn't been the same as he was in 2022 when he played at the second team All-Pro level. To be honest, I mean, what we've seen from this group in the 49ers, when they can fire on all cylinders, they're the toughest team to beat. They have talent at the running back position, one of the best wide receiver groups, and a very talented play caller in Kyle Shanahan. And Deebo backed up all the trash talk. He came out with the black Air Force Ones, and you know when somebody dresses like that, they mean business, and usually they deliver. He had a hat trick of touchdowns and over 100 scrimmage yards, and that is something that you don't expect. Philly has been a team that is a very physical team, but on Sunday, they look soft. I mean, getting outran, outpaced, and just not even being close to place where Deebo is just running on basically all of his touchdowns virtually untouched. There was a time that he broke a tackle, but again, it just comes out as a team looking soft. And this is a big gut check moment for the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they have been up atop the NFC for the majority of the year, and now that one game lead is basically a push, because if they slip up one more and San Francisco's able to win, they have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Philly. San Francisco's defense, with all these pass rushers, they just look as deep as ever. I don't think they made a true impact in this game, but they were able to slow down Jalen Hurts in the offense in key situations. The coverages were there for much of the game. They were basically plastered to the receivers for those deep balls. The only way the Eagles generated space was through the slant game through A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. So with this performance, I mean, if you were to come up with power rankings, I have to tip my cap and give it to the 49ers. They are the best team in football right now. By embarrassing the Cowboys earlier this year and now the Philadelphia Eagles, those are the two biggest competitions that they had, and they hung 40 pieces on both of those teams, who are known to have pretty solid defenses, to say the least. Philly has gotten away with playing from behind, and like I said, a lot of these mistakes or these weaknesses were disguised by the winning, and they were exploited on Sunday. They have to go back to the drawing board and face another pretty electric offense in the Dallas Cowboys on the road next week on Sunday Night Football. That game will be by far the most important game for the Philadelphia Eagles this year. If they're able to win that basically sews up the division. A 2-game lead with a tiebreaker is very tough to overcome with 4 or 5 games left in the year. And with the Dallas Cowboys, they are hungry again. They are on pace to be yet again a very good team in the NFC. Philly better be careful. I think right now what they need to do is figure out ways to get pressure yet again. We saw that early in this game against the 49ers, and then after that the ball got out quick. That really exposed the back end pretty well there. So need to tighten things up there. I think offensively, the run game was non-existent. Just seemed like they just totally ignored that from the second quarter onwards, when it was still very much a game. We'll see what happens next week at Dallas, but I think right now the 49ers are atop the NFC despite the records not really aligning that way. And let's hope for a rematch in the NFC playoffs between these two teams, because that is absolutely must-see TV. Speaking of the Dallas Cowboys, they played the Seattle Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. This was a game marred by penalties, but on both sides. I don't think either side necessarily benefited more than the other. There were situational fouls, and I was confused by certain calls. I think far too many penalties were called in this game. I mean, each team went over 100 yards in penalty yardage, just slowing down the game to another extent. But Seattle found ways to poke holes in this defense. I haven't seen the Dallas defense, other than San Francisco, get really exposed at this degree, and they've hung up 35 points on this vaunted Dallas defense, especially targeting Deron Bland, who, despite him having the record now for pick sixes in a season and him leading the league with 8 INTs on the year, he is still subject to getting burnt, just like his predecessor that he's replacing right now in Trayvon Diggs. Trayvon likes to bite and is very aggressive trying to jump for balls and to go for interceptions. Duran kind of takes that to an extra degree because he jumps and he can get pick sixes off of them. But this time, just simply outpaced by DK Metcalf, who is a very similar receiver to AJ Brown, who I'm sure will get a lot of looks at Duran Bland next week. But despite all of those, Seattle had a chance to really take control of this game, but just could not do so in the fourth quarter. Their offense stymied, and you can talk about the injuries to their running back room. They didn't have Chardonnay to finish the game. They were already without Kenneth Walker to come into the game, but let's face it, everybody's banged up this year, and nobody's going to feel sorry for the Seattle Seahawks. And yet again, they blew an opportunity. This is their third straight loss, losing to San Francisco, Dallas, and the LA Rams earlier this November. And that means with them having going down to San Francisco to play the 49ers, that loss there could basically end their division hopes. And they already don't have the tiebreaker to LA. And right now, that is really questioning whether or not they can make the playoffs. I do like what Seattle is doing, and I still think they have a chance to get that 7 seed just based off their talent, but the schedule is just brutal. I mean, after San Francisco, they play the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday night, and that is a team desperately needing a win as well. So it's going to be very tough for Seattle based off a schedule to get into the dance. But let's talk about Dallas, where after that loss to Philadelphia, they have basically steamrolled opponent through opponent, and this time they beat a team that was above 500 to start that game. I think Dak has been very good since that stretch. You see an interception or two, but it's nowhere near the level of what we saw him in the past, which is a very good sign for Dallas. Now, the LA Clippers back on track. After their 4-game skid to start off the James Harden addition to their roster, they seem to figure out some chemistry kinks, and I think that Ty Lue has figured out some rotations to help out this squad. The issue was always with Ivica Zubac, who was the center who clogged up the lane and then didn't allow for a lot of space, and he's not really good with guarding guys on the perimeter. We see a lot of bigs push him out of the perimeter, and he is a very slow-moving player, unfortunately. He gives you something on the defensive end, and he gives you rebounding, but just not talented enough as a defender to stop players from going by him to the rim. James Harden hasn't had the best of starts, but he is getting slowly implemented into Ty Lue's offensive scheme. And for Paul George, I think his plays picked up after that 4-game skid as well. He had a game-winning 3-pointer against the Golden State Warriors. They lost the first end of that back-to-back, but they responded very well from a come-from-behind victory. And these wins will slowly start to pile up. I think it's just a matter of getting through the chemistry kinks and figuring out those rotations, like I said. LA still has some work to do, though. I think the Western Conference is very much muddled up right now. It's still less than a quarter way into the year, so we still have yet to see any team truly break away from the pack, but they will be muddled in the playoff mix for sure. It's just a matter of whether or not they're a play-in team or regular playoff team. But I do think now their playoff hopes remain alive. They have better expectations, right? They want to win a title, so definitely need another piece. Just need a big who can defend on the perimeter, still stretch the floor, and that way the lane isn't as clogged up as what you see when Ivica Zubac is out on the court. On Sunday, the college football playoff field was revealed, with Michigan taking the top spot, followed by number 2 Washington, number 3 Texas, and stunningly 4th ranked Alabama. And what this means is that leaves Florida State out of the college football race, and also Georgia. Let's talk about the matchups first. That means 1, Michigan is going to be playing number 4, Alabama, and that is a tough ask because Michigan has looked consistently one of the best teams in the country, and they're undefeated right now, but it's a whole different animal playing an SEC squad. And I know Alabama certainly has been suspect at times. They've lost to Texas. They have lost or nearly lost to Auburn and took a 4th down miracle for that win to get pulled out. But they handled business against Georgia, who has been honestly a thorn in their side recently. Certainly is something to be concerned about. They are a ground and pound type of team, very physical. I think the Big Ten is the second most physical conference out there in college football. So maybe it is an even matchup, but certainly not the easiest matchup you would expect for a 4th seed. But the fact is that Alabama was able to win the SEC title against Georgia, and that only propels them to have that head-to-head tiebreaker, and a conference win, I think, supplants what you can get from an entertainment standpoint for the college football playoff. For the other matchup, we have Washington defeating Oregon in a really tight game in the Pac-12 championship, which is the last one for that conference, unfortunately, due to its unfortunate demise. And they'll be taking on Texas, who really took the brakes off of Oklahoma State in the Big 12 conference championship game. In these two teams, I think you get very high-powered offenses, and they're very similar finesse type of teams. The Pac-12 is always built on speed and finesse, and you get a little bit more physicality from the Big 12, but it's still very soft defenses and a lot of big offensive concepts with motions and quick passes to the outside. It's too early to make a prediction, but I would think right now you still maybe lean on a tight affair, still go with Michigan for that 1-4 matchup, and I would love to see Texas get back to a national championship game, but we'll see what happens. To transition to what happened with Florida State. Florida State had this excellent season, 13-0, won the ACC title game, but unfortunately lost their star quarterback in Jordan Travis in their 11th game of the year. He snapped his leg and done for the year. And yes, they were able to get to the ACC title game and just look like a grind out process. I think the thing is that if they were to get in, you can say any team can win on any given matchup, but the fact that they were struggling so long with their rivals in University of Florida and then later against Louisville, it would mean that they would probably get run out of the building against a team like Michigan, which I understand as a 1 seed, you deserve to have the easiest matchup. You draw the lowest seed. I think Florida State would be absolutely deserving if Jordan Travis was available. But from what we expect the college football playoff to be, yes, they have the better record, but it's the worst of the Power 5 conferences. To be honest, like what they could be able to do, they wouldn't be able to stand with a team like Michigan. It's a nice story, and I'm very sad for Seminoles fans because they have the right to feel slighted. They have the right to feel robbed. But I think the committee was right because they do consider injuries to a team, especially like the quarterback who was playing at a Heisman type of level. So as unfortunate and as tough as it sounds, I do have to agree that the committee was right to keep Florida State out of the college football playoff for this year. Now, if they were to go to that expansion level, obviously they would make it there, and that would be a very exciting thing. But to cap it off at 4, I think it's right that they were left out of the top 4. Do you remember when the Green Bay Packers got off to that pretty good start and then they kind of fell flat in October? We were questioning Jordan Love's ability to be a starter in the NFL and if he's even the guy for the Green Bay Packers. But since November, I want to say, the Green Bay Packers have really figured things out. They've beaten the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving. They beat the LA Chargers, and now they beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And Jordan Love has been really on a tear. He's fixed the turnover issues in those 3 games. No interceptions thrown. And I think what he's been able to do has really earned him another year to look and see if he's the guy, if not really prove that he is the franchise quarterback of the future for the Green Bay Packers. He's been making throws very similar to his predecessor in Aaron Rodgers. To go up against Patrick Mahomes at home is no easy feat. And the Chiefs offense this year has been clunky. I mean, plagued by drops, plagued by injuries to Travis Kelce to start off the year, and that led to them dropping that opening game against the Detroit Lions, and just has not been as crisp and consistent for the Kansas City Chiefs that we know to love in the Patrick Mahomes era. In fact, we can all agree that their defense has been their best unit consistently this year, and they did their part. But I think the issue was, again today, drops and just not executing in the red areas. There were 2 field goals early, and kicking field goals in the red zone will definitely get you beat because that led to the Green Bay Packers countering with 2 touchdowns of their own, and was a 14-6 halftime lead there. Packers ended up winning this game, and a lot can be attested though to the late game situation. I have been critical of referees and just officiating as a whole through all sports. And I think we got to talk about some examples we saw. There was the first issue where we saw Patrick Mahomes scurrying to the sideline to get up every last inch for a first down, but was blasted. I think a lot of times when refs see a player like that, especially a quarterback, get hit, they want to throw the flags, and they did throw the flag. You can see on replays though, Mahomes was clearly inside, and the fact that we can't review those aspects, especially in the last 2 minutes, when those are the most important 2 minutes of any ball game, but even for the entirety of a ball game, they need to review that. You could clearly see there's some green before the chalk, and that flag should have been picked up. Example number 1. Example number 2. You saw a deep ball thrown to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and this time he was clearly interfered with the attempt to come down with the football. You saw Ballantyne, the safety, reach over the back and basically climb aboard and knock that ball away. Early contact, excessive contact, should have been a PI, first and goal. Most likely the Chiefs would have been able to knock that out and pull away a victory there, but no flag in that circumstance. And then Hail Mary circumstances, for example, number 3, is always going to be a lot of things let go. It has to be very blatant. It has to be like a very clear push off by an offensive player, or a push in the back, a holding, some type of takedown early before the ball arrives for a PI or defensive foul to be called. And this time we saw that again with Travis Kelce getting pushed. I don't know if it was success enough, but it definitely was enough to dislodge him off his feet to jump for that Hail Mary pass. And again, this means the Kansas City Chiefs paid the price for it. It's certainly interesting because you have replay and there's all this technology invested with like AWS for stats and stuff with the NFL. But I really think in order to help officials, they're going to miss calls. That is a human element of the game. But the thing to correct that human element is the technology. Let's use it to the fullest. Let's review every aspect. Penalties, turnovers, which is already there, but can certainly do so on a bigger basis. Any type of play should be reviewed to its fullest if there's anything in question. So again, asking sports leagues across the globe to do that, expand replay to its fullest capability, because that is what the fans deserve. That is what to get a better product on the field, because we want calls to be right and we have something that can really help that human element. But if we're not using it to its full ability, then what's the point of even having it? And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you as always for tuning in. Greatly appreciated. Please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We have clips from this episode on TikTok and Instagram, and you can get it also here on YouTube in our playlist. Just hit the channel button and go into the playlist, and you can see clips from the NFL, cricket, the NBA, all in there as well. And additionally, you can get the Spotify audio as well. Links are in the description. Thank you, Joy, for editing this podcast, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.